Thank you, Robert, for the wonderful lecture. I hope you don't mind me asking a question which deals more with, I think, an ideological question rather than an artistic question.
I raised it, so you go ahead.
Is listening to your lecture in response as well to Wednesday's lecture by Okwui, the democratic spectator, and then now a kind of, or then a kind of revolution revisited. Also following Wednesday, I was
I'm not sure I didn't get that.
On Wednesday.
I heard what Okwui said, but I'm not sure how you characterized it. I didn't get that.
I was thinking about the notion of revolution here mainly as an underlying. It's not really related necessarily to Wednesday's lecture, but also to the theme of this. It sort of made me think whether the ultimate challenge that a global society is facing now is understanding the insurgencies that are mediatized every day. And whether when we're speaking about revolution, whether we're talking revolution or reformation, also in
I'll go to that straight. Is Okwui here, by the way? Because I would have liked to have entered into dialogue. Maybe we can do it right now. There are insurgencies of all kinds, and there are revolutionary movements of a variety of kinds now. There have been revolutionary movements and insurgencies for most of the history of the 19th and 20th centuries. The character of them has changed from the bourgeois revolutions of the late 18th, early 19th century to bourgeois revolutions in the 20th century, but aligned to decolonialization and so on and so forth. And it seems to me that they have produced important art, but there has been important art produced that is not concerned with them. Because it happens in the same time, consciousness needs to expand to encompass both. But the idea that all art should be reduced to one set of criteria or needs or conditions, it seems to me is a mistake. And we have countless examples of that. I, by the way, for what it's worth, spent the 1960s and 70s being quite on the left and quite active. I worked with David Alfaro Siqueiros in Mexico, painting socialist realist murals. Terrible things, terrible paintings and bad politics. But I did it earnestly. I thought it was necessary. I outgrew it, but I learned a great deal. I respect some of the things that Siqueiros did, but I don't admire his politics. But the idea that having been engaged with that meant that I could therefore not take seriously the work, for example, of a Saul LeWitt, who from the point of view of Siqueiros is a nothing, you know, or vice versa, that from the point of view of a Saul LeWitt, I cannot be mindful of the kind of work that Siqueiros did. And I should say, by the way, Saul had an enormously broad and eclectic taste. That was one of the remarkable things about him. He was utterly rigorous in his own practice, but he saw the possibility of other practices very broadly, and he supported it very broadly. He routinely exchanged work with young artists where the thing he exchanged with them was worth 10 times, if not more, than what they gave him, but he was exchanging art and not a commodity. So yes, there is work of this kind which is important. There was a fair amount of it in my Biennale. There's a fair amount of it now. But I don't think we can get to a one criteria sample for art under any circumstances. It's not good for political art that that be done, as well as it's not good for other things. Parenthetically, I would say one thing to Okwui. In his presentation, he presented this sort of dichotomy or tension between May 68 and 1980, the riots and suppression of riots in Gwangju. He invidiously said that 68 is a nostalgia exercise concerned with bourgeois students, that it is something that should not be allowed to overshadow more real, from his point of view, insurrectionary or democratic movements in Asia, etc., and so on down the line. Now, Okwui was 5 years old in 68, so he can't be blamed for not knowing what happened there. But in fact, May 68 in France was not about bourgeois students. I, by the way, was there in 68, and I was a bourgeois student. But I was not the only person on the streets or the only person active. The CFDT, which is the French Socialist Union, the CGT, the French Communist Union, called a general strike that drove the president of France to another country to consult his generals and check out his tanks. The results of this were not successful. And I'm the last person to be nostalgic about things that fail. In fact, I'm not interested in nostalgia at all. But it seems to me that it is utterly invidious to take a general social movement of that time and compare it invidiously again to a contemporary one in order to say that we are now the revolutionary front. The fact of the matter was that Europe, and France in particular, were changed profoundly by that. It was one of those rare instances where working class people and students and many others actually got together and did what? They entered into dialogue. I, in France, for example, went from my school to a Catholic school. I was in a Protestant school. Catholics and Protestants didn't talk, so we went and talked. We didn't change the world, we didn't have the socialist revolution we dreamed of, but we had a dialogue. Furthermore, '68 was not just about Paris. It happened in Germany, it happened in Italy, it happened in Tokyo, it happened in Mexico, it happened in America, it happened absolutely everywhere. In Mexico City, bourgeois students were shot on the orders of the president of Mexico, Luis Echeverria. In Tokyo, riots took place and there was police violence against students there. In Germany, there was violence which led ultimately and regrettably to the creation of the Red Brigades. In Italy, there was violence against students which led ultimately and regrettably to the creation of terrorism there. '68 is an enormously complex phenomenon. It was worldwide. It was indeed the year of the Tet Offensive. And incidentally, personally, I was draft age. And all of these things happen in a way that to take that date and caricature it and use the language you did is not political. It is reprehensible, and you shouldn't do it again.
Okay, Okwui. We'll let Okwui have the last word. I'm sure that will, unless Rob cares to respond.
Well, thank you, Rob, for your reprimand. And I think, first and foremost, I think either you did not understand what I said.
I have notes of all of it.
But let me just finish. I was 5 in '68.
Yes, you were.
And do you know where I was?
Yes, I do.
And where was I?
You were in Nigeria.
No, where in Nigeria?
I think the name is Kabbalah, no?
No, not Kabbalah. Where was I in Nigeria in 1968?
I don't know where you were in Nigeria.
Okay, but you knew I was 5 years old.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Well, let me tell you. In 1968, I was in the middle of a civil war.
Okay.
Do you get that?
You tell me. I believe
Okay,
it.
well, and the second thing I want to say to you is to make the kind of caricature that you just made right now, shows very clearly that you repudiated the very talk that you just gave about dialogue. And my point about May '68 is precisely that it is local. It is not world-changing. It was not world-changing, and historically it is borne out. In 1968 in Nigeria, by the way, when my family was evicted from Calabar, I was born in Calabar. I'm not from Calabar. Do you want me to give you my biography?
I don't think it's necessary because
okay,
that is not the point I made.
But that's your point. That is your point, and I'm making that.
My point is that you made a statement.
I'm making that
my
particular
point is that you made statements about an experience.
I'm making that particular point, and I think you are utterly wrong, and obviously you couldn't help yourself.
I think we've had enough.
You just couldn't help yourself.
Come on.
It's absolutely reprehensible.
You can continue this dialogue outside.
It's absolutely reprehensible.
I'll hand out the boxing gloves.
Okay.
Round 2 on the lawn. I'd just like to finish. I guess that was bound to happen, and no doubt.
No, of course, Rob couldn't help himself.
Those conversations will continue, no doubt. I would like to say personally that I think Robert reminded us of 3 things tonight. First of all, I responded very well to his discussion about language. I once heard the wonderful Adrian Piper amazing artist who had the pleasure to work with and who I was incredibly intimidated to go and meet. And she said to me, the problem, unless you can distill complex ideas and write about them in simple language that everybody can understand, you have failed. And she's one of the most wonderful artists who makes incredibly complex works. I think also Rob reminded us of the role of the artist.